Hi, everybody. It's Alex here with Technology Executives Club, and this time with a special briefing called The Six Hidden AI and Digital Transformation Project Killers and How to Identify Them Before It's Too Late. I've got with me Tory Bjorklund, who's the founder of Victorified Consulting. Hi, Tory.
Hey, Alex. Great to be with you again.
Great to have you here. Before we get started, watch this and all of our videos at technologyexecutivesclub.com. Hey, Tori, how are you doing?
Doing great, Alex.
It's
How are
great
you
to see.
doing?
I'm doing great. So, for everybody who doesn't know, Tori, you're the founder and CEO of a company called Victorified Consulting. Victorified literally means in Latin success assurance. You're literally an expert in AI and digital transformation projects. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I've been
And
doing
what,
it for a long time. I guess that makes me an expert, right?
well, that's what I was going to add. What makes someone an expert? You've been doing it for a long time, and you've literally done hundreds of projects in this area.
Yes.
Yeah, the way this briefing came about, everybody, is Tori was one of our keynote speakers at our recent summit on AI and digital transformation in the enterprise. And you gave a really great presentation on this exact topic, which we call the six hidden project killers and how to identify them. Tell us a little, how did you come up with this topic of these six hidden project killers?
Yeah, well, I've been studying quite a while, both the internal or the projects that I've been involved with, as well as those that have been published in the press and whatnot, and to just understand what makes for the problems that kill these projects and what makes for successful projects, and really what's the difference.
Well, the thing that's fascinating to me is that you call these hidden project killers, right? So, in other words, someone could be in a big project right now. Someone watching this, I'm sure almost everybody has a big project or an important project. They could be watching it right now thinking, oh, my project's going along. You're saying maybe not so sure, right? That these are hidden. Is that
Right.
accurate? Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, actually, most technology transformations are set up to fail long before anybody even realizes it. And that's where these six project killers come in. They're quiet, they're silent, and often not seen. And before anybody realizes there's anything wrong, they're actually already put in place.
Kind of terrifying. I mean, we all know AI and digital transformation is a big thing right now, and people are getting pushed to do these projects,
Oh,
our
yeah.
audience. And so now you're saying, look, that project that you're working on, there's these six hidden project killers, and you need to identify them basically before it's too late. And what's really interesting to me is we all heard about the MIT report that
Yeah.
came out early in the year, right? MIT said that 95% of
Yeah.
AI projects were failing, but you had another stat that you talked about just for projects in general. What was that stat?
Yeah. Bain put out a study, 88% of the projects are failing. And that's recent. The numbers bounce all over, right? Somewhere
Yeah.
anywhere between 70 to 95%. They've consistently been that way, probably for 30 plus years.
So you've got these six hidden traps, so to speak, which we'll talk about in a second, right? So if nothing
Yeah.
else, someone can watch this and at least know what these hidden traps or project killers are so they can look for them. But I think you said you were going to share some of the symptoms also, right? So just by continuing to watch this, they'll get a sense of what are these six hidden project killers and some of the symptoms, right?
Right. They'll be able to see whether or not maybe either they're making the decisions, which really these all amount to decisions, early decisions that are made even before project kickoff. And they'll be able to identify if I made these decisions and what's going to happen if I don't do something about it.
That sounds good. Now, I know from also talking to you, and we'll talk about this more later, but I want everybody to know now that if somebody has some of these symptoms, you've developed an assessment which you normally give to your clients, which can take them through a series of questions, and you can tell them very clearly if they have these problems. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it helps you identify those so they're no longer hidden, really. It's like taking an x-ray of
Yeah.
your project or pre-project, depending on where your project is in the whole process.
Well, that's a good analogy because my knees hurt all the time because I've been playing tennis and now pickleball for so long. They say, how's it feel? They give you the initial questions and then they say, oh, let's take an x-ray. That's what you're saying. So the x-ray for you would be like the assessment. So let's get into it. Why don't you just share with us, so everybody has it right now, what are these 6 hidden project killers and maybe a sign that they might have 1 or 2?
Sure. So I'll just go down the list quick and a little more detail on each one. So the first one is, I refer to it as a technology first mentality. And that's
Uh-huh.
when you're focusing on technology rather than the business problem or opportunity you want to solve. The second one is underestimating change management. The third one is paving the cow path. The the fourth one is poor data readiness and governance. Fifth one is ambition without discipline. And the sixth one is what I call the intelligent customer gap.
Let's start with the cow path. What are you
Right.
talking about when you say paving the cow path? And maybe share some of the symptoms, a little more detail about how someone could say,
Sure.
hey, I got any cows over here? So go ahead.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Plainly, to say it plainly, what
Yeah.
paving the cow path means, it's automating broken processes rather
Hmm.
than fixing them first.
Okay.
And where we get that analogy of the cow path is in the early days before there was asphalt and they were trying to make a road, they would just follow the path that the cows made through the woods because it was easier than actually clearing the woods and making a road. And it was easier to make them that way, but it didn't make traveling any easier.
Oh,
You go circuitous ways through the woods. So basically, if you've got lousy processes and you automate them, it's not actually getting you faster from where you are to where you want to be. It's just creating garbage sooner and quicker. So really, what we're talking about there, what it looks like, let's
yeah.
say, is that when you're talking about processes or requirements or something, you keep hearing people saying, well, that's how we've always done it, or, well, that's
Yeah.
not how we do it here. And that's a signal that
Yeah.
people are focused on the cow path. This is the way that we've always gone. And what it leads to, though, is you will never find an off the shelf system that actually follows the cow path. Okay, because they're trying, these off the shelf systems are implementing best practices, not
Right.
windy cow paths. And so if you don't straighten out your cow path and put in decent processes, you're going to do a ton of customization and you're not going to find any efficiencies in the new system. And oftentimes you'll actually eliminate the ability to use the technical capabilities to make yourself more efficient.
So before we go any further, first of all, now I get it. When we were building the asphalt roads, the cows were going a certain way and we just did it. And the metaphor that you're using is you've got the standard operating procedures, which a lot of people are just doing in their heads. We know that a lot of these
Right.
companies. And so when you go to automate these standard operating procedures and say, hey, put so and so on it, she or he does this all the time, and then they just try and automate their process,
That's right.
that's not best practice.
That's right.
So I assume there's hope here because I don't want people to say, "Oh, if I got this, I'm out of luck." You're saying you can fix that, right? Once you identify, you can fix if you find that's something that you've been doing, you can fix that with more of a best practice procedure. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what we do is we help clients then to redefine, re-engineer their processes to fit best practices and to make them more capable to be automated. And in fact, studies have shown that 40 to 60% of the gains made in digital transformation are made by changes to the process rather than the technology that's implemented.
So it's not just go get, and I think a lot of the folks probably know this, but you may be in a project and you start to see these signs. It's still happening, even though you may know it. I see what you're saying. So the signals are there. You can change
Yeah,
it.
that's the way we've always done it.
And if somebody says, "Hey, I think this may be happening," we'll talk about that assessment in a few minutes once we go through some of the other project killers, just so everybody knows them. You're saying once you go through this assessment, you can actually very clearly tell somebody you got this or you don't, right?
Right.
Okay, but there is hope if you identify it. That's the thing I want to get to,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
otherwise, why bother? So,
Right.
okay, good. So there is hope. All right, so that's great. So let's go through again and maybe go a little more detail about each of these hidden project killers. So someone watching this will say, yeah, I may have that or not. So go
Sure.
ahead.
Yeah, so the first one I'd mentioned was technology first mentality. And basically,
Yeah.
what that looks like is when the CEO comes to the technical person, the CIO or whoever, and says, what's our AI strategy? Instead of saying, how is AI going to help us with this business problem? They're just focused on how we're going to implement some technology. And the problem that leads to is, again, it generally leads to a scope problem. If you said, hey, we're going to implement AI, what problem are you going to solve? And when do you know that you're done? And how
Yeah.
do you even measure your ROI if you don't know what your current costs are for a process, for example, that you're trying to automate?
Yeah.
And just to give you a quick story about that, Birmingham City Council in the UK, they chose to go with Oracle because most government agencies, that's what they implement. They didn't go through the requirements analysis and any kind of fit gap or anything like that. They said, Oracle, that's what everybody else uses. Let's just go with them. And they estimated and got estimates on it about $25 million implementation. After they've spent $135 million on the implementation, they literally filed for the equivalency of what we would consider bankruptcy. And, they had no idea how to define success because nobody knew what problems they were trying to solve. They just said, we're implementing Oracle.
So I know you probably have a series of questions for this one. What would be one or two quick questions somebody watching this could say, I may have that. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so early on, you can ask yourself, does your technology roadmap focus on business goals or on trending technologies?
Yeah.
Another
So
one, for example, have you done an assessment of your current business processes and do you understand where the pain points are? So have your team told you, hey, we're having this pain in this process? That's a good indication. If you've done that, hey, we can focus on trying to make this process less, create less friction and less heat in the organization. And maybe technology has a role in that. But now you're focused on fixing a problem, right? And that's,
just
a
just
couple of the questions that we ask to help identify
and
those kinds of problems.
that's in the assessment, which I understand has
That's right.
many questions to go over all the
Right.
different signals. Okay.
Yeah.
So I get that one because we hear this all the time in our peer advisory group, which is, yeah, I'm getting a lot of heat from the board, all the executives, CEO. What's going on with AI? What's going on with AI? Because there's so much press about it. But that is not the way to use technology. That's the point. So
Right.
almost everybody here is feeling the heat. The question is, are you in a project now where you maybe either you or somebody on the team felt the heat and you just started going with it and didn't do these fundamental block and tackle project planning
Yeah. And if you catch it
processes?
early enough, it's not that hard to fix, right? You go, what are the problems we're trying to fix here?
Yeah.
Or the
Yeah.
opportunities we're trying to take advantage of? And you define them. And then everything going forward is focused on that.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, let's keep moving. So
Sure.
we've done the cow path, we've done technology first mentality. What's the
Yeah,
next one?
another one is underestimating change management.
Mm,
And people give, lip service to change management, but they don't really realize how important that is. And if, one of the symptoms of not having the appropriate change management is that people don't trust the system.
yeah,
So if you don't use proper change management, you could implement a perfectly sound technical solution and people are still off doing their work in spreadsheets or whatever because they don't trust the system that you just spent millions of dollars to implement. And I've actually worked on projects where some people are actively working to undermine the implementation because they don't want the new system at all. And if you don't deal with that early and often, you're going to pay for that dearly.
oh, absolutely. So we just talked about the summit. We had another speaker who was talking, I won't say who it is, who was talking about how successful the project is. You know, the speaker I'm talking
Right,
about. And even in that presentation, he was talking about how a lot of the employees weren't really too keen on this when they started.
right. Leadership almost pulled the plug on that project.
Yeah, which would have been a big mistake because it's very successful.
Right,
So again, if you're in this environment and you're starting to see some of these signs, then you're going to want the more detailed questions from Tory that you have to indicate is this is maybe normal for change management or actually a deal killer, right? A project
right.
killer, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And we're asking questions around first of all, do you have a change management strategy? And then detailed questions of what does that change management strategy look like? Does it address this, that, and the other thing? Goes through all of best practices for change management strategy so you can get a rating on how solid is your change management.
So someone could use this assessment not only to say, hey, do I got the hidden killers, but also to say, no, we're good.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know,
absolutely.
we're
Yeah.
sailing in the right direction. Right.
Yeah, and some of our clients use it throughout the project. So they see where they're at now, and then they make course corrections, and then they take it again, and they just continue to
Oh,
improve throughout the entire project.
it's like a
Yeah,
compass. I like that. That's good. All right, well, let's go to the next one.
yeah,
And we've already done paving the cow path. So we've done the first
yeah.
three.
Poor
So
data readiness and governance.
yeah,
That's real common, and you don't have to talk a lot about that. People realize that's an issue.
yeah,
But here's an interesting stat. In a recent survey, 77% of the leaders believed their data was fine.
yeah.
Then they went through and did an analysis of the data, and it was far worse than they thought. So 3/4 of the people that think their data is fine probably don't have good data. And I'll just give one
Yeah.
small example. One of the most common ones, we work a lot with manufacturers, is their routing and their production operations are not accurate.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to, for example, schedule production, or in order management, trying to make a promise to a customer, particularly if you build the order, you can't do that accurately if you don't have accurate data for your routes or your production operations. And that's one of the most common ones that we see, is really lousy data in those areas. And they have no idea how bad it really is. But then you find out that the production manager has his own spreadsheet, and he's been keeping his numbers for a long time because the system's numbers are, lousy.
So is that one of the questions?
One of the questions that we ask is, have you profiled your legacy data to identify quality issues such as duplicates, missing values, and inconsistency? You do profile. Not everybody, 77% have lousy data, let's say. Well, that means you could be in that 23%, let's find out. So you don't spend a ton of money if you don't need to. But then it starts asking questions and drills down in that. Do you have a documented plan for cleansing your data before migrating it to the new
Yeah.
system? Those kinds of things. Again, these fixes are relatively simple, but you have to do them early on.
So the key is to use this assessment initially as, hey, do I have a project killer? But then you can
Yeah.
also use the assessment throughout parts of the project to say, are we still on track?
Well,
Right?
yeah, not only does it, so it gives you a ranking of approximation of your percentage of chance for success.
Wonderful.
And then it gives you for each area, if you have problems in that area, it gives you a 30, 60, 90-day roadmap for things that you can do immediately, things that you can do. It's not critical that you do it tomorrow, but you need to handle this sometime a little bit later to prioritize those kinds of things so you can get the project on track and keep it on track.
That sounds awesome. All right, let's keep moving. That's the
Sure.
data. There's two more, right?
Yeah. So what I call ambition without discipline. And that's when an organization has huge vision. And I love swinging for the fences. I'm a
Yeah.
visionary, Alex.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
love
you are.
vision. But the reality is, if you don't have the appropriate discipline, actually execute on your vision, you know what
Yeah.
vision without execution is? It's a dream. That's all it is. It doesn't get you anything. So you
Yeah.
have to have execution. And if you don't have the necessary discipline, and what that looks like is well-defined scope, pilot projects, MVPs, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it's traditional now, but project management with sprint planning and those kinds of things, making sure that you're biting off only as much as you can chew. That's an important thing. If you don't do that, what ends up happening is your project burn down will quit moving. You'll be at about 60%. They'll be telling you, hey, we're 60% done. And then 2 months later, we're 60% done. And then 3 months later, we're still 60% done and another $1 million into it.
Yeah.
So you need to fix that. And this is where the questions come in on the assessment. Do you have a scope management plan that's defined? And does it identify how changes in scope will be reviewed, approved, and documented? Is your project schedule realistic, given the scope, complexity, and availability of resources? Those are simple kinds of questions you can be asking your project team. And determining whether or not you've got the appropriate guardrails in place to make sure that you can actually execute on your vision.
You know, I've talked to a lot of technology leaders, and scope creep, which is what you're talking about, like, extremely common. I'd be surprised if there was a project that didn't have scope creep. And am I right about that? So it's not, they all have it. The question is whether you have the discipline to rein it back in. Is that what you're saying? Pretty much?
That's right. And the proper governance. So, one thing, projects typically never experience scope creep during a sprint. Adds anything to the sprint. Why? Because they have well-defined objectives. They know what the end looks like, and it's fairly close in view. And they also know that they have an opportunity to add to the next sprint.
Yeah.
So it takes discipline to maintain scope, and you need to apply those same principles to the overall project.
And so you have a series of questions, like you just mentioned a couple of the symptoms or the questions, but your questions go a little deeper, so you really know if this is a real potential killer or not. Okay. So let's go to the last one. I think you called it intelligent customer gap.
Right.
What is that? Go ahead and explain that one to us.
Yeah. So basically, there's an idea of an intelligent customer, and that's basically where you are making sure that you or people on your team have the necessary skill set, knowledge, and experience to be able to hold your vendors accountable. If you plan on your vendors being the only ones that know, you are going to be in trouble. I mean, basically, your vendor is going to start doing things that you don't approve of, but you don't even know you don't approve of until you find out later, why did we do that? Who approved that? Those kinds of things. When you start asking those questions, it's because you have an intelligent customer gap. Or, for example, you have invoices from the vendor that have already exceeded the original estimate. It's like they're still invoicing you. And it's like, well, wait a minute, we're way beyond what we already estimated. Why is that? Okay. That's a symptom that nobody was holding that vendor accountable, because you should have known they were going to go over, right? Way before that. In fact, you need to have an estimate to completion all throughout that process. And you also have to know if those estimates are going to have some semblance of reality or not. And that takes a certain amount of intelligence on your part. Now, you can bring it in-house with training and things like that, or you can bring in other consultants onto your team that have the necessary experience to hold the system integrators responsible.
Yeah, and just rein it in and provide that governance capability that you're talking about.
Right. And really what that comes down to in our assessment, for example, is we ask questions like, is there a named individual who owns the overall project outcome? And does that individual have P&L responsibility? You want somebody not in IT owning the overall project outcome. You want somebody from the business that has some skin in the game, that is owning the results. Now you're no longer depending on a vendor to own the results. You have somebody with P&L responsibility owning the results of that project.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And again, when you do the assessment, which we'll get to next, not only can they identify if this is a potential project killer through these symptoms, but also there's a fix for this, right? That's what you're saying.
That's right.
There's a fix that either you or somebody else can come and help them, or they can do once they know it. Okay, so this has been great. So let's talk about the assessments, because I think anybody who's watched this now knows what these 6 hidden project killers are. And in fact, why don't you repeat them in a second? And then we'll talk about the assessment and what it does for these folks. And everybody keep watching, because Tory's got a special offer for members of the Technology Executives Club community that if you're watching this, you are one, to get this assessment literally for free, right? Tory, that's what we're saying?
That's right.
So we'll get into that in a second. So do me a favor.
Sure.
Just repeat the 6 project killers again, and then we'll get into the assessment itself.
Yep. So the first one is a technology first mentality, and that's focused on technology, not the business problem or opportunity you're trying to solve. Underestimating change management, that really speaks to organizational readiness that gets overlooked. Third one is paving the cow path, automating broken processes instead of fixing them.
My favorite.
Core data readiness and governance.
Yeah.
Which everybody knows. I don't need to explain what that is.
Yeah.
The fifth one is ambition without discipline, having big vision, but no capacity to execute on that, or not the necessary discipline.
Yeah.
And the sixth one is an intelligent customer gap, depending on the vendor instead of owning your own success or packing your own shoe.
Yeah. Okay. So that's wonderful. So those are the 6 potential project killers and some of the symptoms.
Yeah,
And if you've watched this and if you think, yeah, I may have 1 or 2 of those, you kind of get that gut feeling, you're going to want this assessment. But even if you're not sure, you're going to want this assessment because, like you said, you can use it as a compass along the way, right?
yeah,
Especially
right.
for an important project. So
Yep,
let's talk about the assessment. And I want to let everybody know, first of all, I want to thank you, Tory, because this assessment is something you normally charge for. And anybody that's watching today as a member of our community is going to be able to get this at no charge. Is that
that's
right?
right. That's
Yeah,
right.
okay. So let's talk about the assessment. Tell us how that works. You're also including some additional services to go with it to really help our community members.
Right.
So with that, why don't you tell us about this assessment? At the end, we'll tell everybody how to get it. So go ahead.
Sure. If you just landed on our website, for example, and went to the assessment page, you'd pay $497 for this assessment, for a
Yep,
single assessment.
yep,
And so what I'm offering is that I will meet with you ahead of time, and we'll just make sure the assessment is something that's going to be of value to you,
right.
because it does take some time. It's 20 to 30 minutes because, depending on how you answer the questions, because it's intelligent. So as you answer questions, it asks more questions. You could have up to 182 questions. So you don't want to spend that time if it isn't going to be worth it. So meet with me. We'll talk through it a little bit more detail, understand your situation, and I'll give you a fair assessment of whether or not the assessment will actually meet your needs. And then you take the assessment, you'll get a full report that includes explanation of where you're strong, where you're weak, and a roadmap on how to get on track with that project or that planned project. And then I'll give you also another meeting with me to review those. And that's optional. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but I'll give you another opportunity to meet with me and to go over the results and see if there's any other insight that I can give you on that and let you ask questions and whatnot.
Yeah,
But basically, there's 6 to 8 categories of questions that are really going to drill down into getting to the symptoms of this situation and help you identify where the potential risks are in the project that you're either currently undergoing in flight or in planning right now. Sure.
Tory, first of all, that's an amazing offer. Everybody, this is real. I mean, if you go to Tory's site, you'll see the assessment. It's $495, right? And Tory is the founder of this company. He normally charges for this time, but because you're part of our community, you'll get to talk to Tory. And everybody knows Tory. He's a straight up guy. He'll tell you if you need this or not. And you take the assessment, you'll have a pretty good understanding whether or not you're like that compass, you're on course or
Right.
not. And then you can debrief with Tory and he can give you some suggestions how to either get back on course or you're fine. Give it a clean bill. Just you're fine. Put some ice on and go home. Right. You're fine. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So it's a wonderful offer and you should take advantage of it while it's still available because we won't offer this forever. And I know Tori can only handle so many people in this kind of situation, right? So, Tori, is there anything else you want to add before I tell people how to get this assessment?
Mostly, I just want to reemphasize that most of these fixes are pretty simple if they're done early enough. But there's a point in time where the window starts closing on these projects, and it's a lot more difficult to get back
Yeah,
the problems. So we want to get it done early. We want to help you with the fixes. They're generally pretty simple, pretty painless.
yeah,
It's dealing with the problems that are caused later downstream that's really expensive and difficult.
that's great advice because if you go back to the sailing compass metaphor, if you start in a direction and you're always using that compass and correcting along the way, you're fine. But if you don't use that compass to course correct until it's 3/4 of the way, you could be 1,000 miles or even more
Right,
in the wrong direction.
right. And that's the difference between navigating and
Yeah,
plotting your route, right? You
yeah,
plot your
right.
route in advance, you say, this is how it's going to go. It never goes that way. You run into storms and other things. And so you have to be able to navigate
Yeah,
and you have to have the right tools to be able to navigate. And this
yeah.
is one of those tools.
This is a great tool. We really appreciate you offering it. Let me tell everybody how to get it. If you're still on this briefing and you have an important project, you want to make sure it's successful, I urge you to go ahead and take the following steps to go ahead and apply for this complimentary assessment with Tory today and right now. So here's how you get the assessment. You'll see the code right below this video. What you want to do is you click that button. It'll take you directly to schedule your introductory discussion with Tory. Make sure when you talk to him, you say, hey, I watched Alex in the Technology Executive Club briefing. Here's the code. Right, Tory? And then you'll honor that. And
Yeah, we want
we'll
them to be able to get the code. So
yeah,
follow
exactly.
the
So
process.
yeah, follow the process, give him the code, schedule the meeting directly with Tory, and he'll get you started. Tory, thank you for making this offer for everybody. I'm really grateful and appreciate you taking the time to record this special briefing, as well as giving people this special offer. Because at the end of the day, your company, your mission, and my mission are the same here. We want to help the people
That's
watching
right.
this. We
Yeah,
want them to have successful projects. And if remind everybody, these are real project killers. And we joke around about cowpath and things like that, right, Tori? But these are real. And you really don't want to be in a situation where you find out about these too late, right, Tori?
exactly. We want people to be able to take advantage of this. And that's what my company is all about, is helping you to succeed with technology.
Absolutely. So that's the end of this special briefing. Go ahead and click that button or that link right below this video now, and let's get started.